Hi guys, welcome back. So even though we're literally like more than halfway through February, I still haven't had a chance to film my January reading wrap up, so I'm gonna take the chance to do that now. I wanted to kind of try a different way of recording my reviews and books for 2025, so instead of doing it on Notion like how I've done it for the past 2 years this year, I wanted to do it in this cute little notebook. So basically for each book I give it 1-page review, and at the end I've just written down all the books that I've read in January. I read 6 books, which is not horrible for me because last year some months I was just so swamped with school and exams that I would literally read like 1 book or no books, whereas in summer months I would read like 10 or more. So we're kind of in average zone. It's a little more than a book a week, which is like decent, I guess. So I'm not mad about it, but yeah, these are the 6 books that I have read in 2025. So I'm excited to talk to you guys about the books that I have read in the month of January, and hopefully I remember them, but I will be looking at my reviews to figure out what they were about. So the first book that I read is so sad to me because I always want to start the new year off with as good of a book as I can, but I started this book last year, late December. It actually took me really long to finish. Not because it was too long, it felt very long, but because it was also an audiobook, and I don't do audiobooks, and with this book it just solidified it, and I think making an audiobook was even worse of an experience. But this book is Those We Drown by Amy Goldsmith, and this is a YA fantasy mystery book. It's supposed to be a thriller, and the blurb makes it sound really dramatic and intriguing, but genuinely this book was so frustrating. It literally made me so upset because number one, the main character is so god awfully stupid. The romance is absolutely so bizarre and actually took me out of it, and the mystery is so half done and literally feels like a disservice to the reader, because genuinely, how stupid do you think the reader is that we couldn't catch these clues? My initial thoughts aside, I want to tell you a little bit about what it's about. What is this girl's name too? I don't know. Okay, it's about this girl named Olivia, and she's like a high schooler. She's supposed to be really smart, emphasis on that. So she gets a scholarship or something to be able to go on this really luxurious cruise trip for free because she's like an overachieving high schooler or something. And so she goes there to do, I don't even know what she does, but she's like somehow gets this trip because she's supposed to be really smart. And she goes there with her childhood best friend Will, and they kind of have like a very disorienting will they won't they situation, which is never properly explained in the book. But she goes there and she realizes that some things are going wrong and like some things are just off, and there are these 3 influencer like triplets or cousins or something called the Sirens, and they have this very magnetic energy around them. Like one of them sings and the whole audience is absolutely enraptured. They're all very glamorous, gorgeous, and something happens and Will disappears, and she's basically like, literally, where is he? Like, she's trying to find him. And generally that sounds like a pretty interesting premise, but I don't know if this is just like a recurring theme, but for me, I've never really had good experiences with these kind of like cruise ship mysteries. The second one that I read, and both of them I did not enjoy. This to me is just so long for no reason. I feel like it was just the most useless book ever. Olivia is such a weird character because she's described as being very anxious because she's kind of the only one who's not a hyper rich person who's at the cruise, and she feels very out of place a lot of times. So when she hits it up with one of these dudes who's supposed to be like mega rich and they're supposed to have like this really nice relationship, it does not come off as that. It comes off very bizarrely. They have no chemistry with each other, and honestly It was just so boring to listen to, and probably even more boring to read. It was so many chapters, the chapters were so long, and the mystery aspect for me was so disappointing, because I feel like even from the blurb you can already kind of predict where the mystery is going, because it's so obvious that like they're literally called the sirens. Like, lock in, Olivia, you are supposed to be smart, can you not think any more critically? And it literally takes her until like 75% to even like think about the idea, like, oh my god, they're like sirens. And just so many of the clues are so boring, and she spends so much of the book literally trying to find out where Will has gone, because he's disappeared, and her only thought process is to, number one, ask the like cruise staff where he is, and she basically does that like 10 times in a row, because they're like, oh well, like you'll see him, or he's like in critical condition. Like, obviously they are so suspicious, but she just like, the investigation is literally just Olivia talking to the same staff member over and over and over again. In between that, this romance which you're supposed to be into, which is not fun at all. So many things about this book literally made me angry, because it's so stupid and it was such a waste of my time. I was literally like, my energy is not going into somewhere productive. I don't get anything out of this book, even if that's like a life lesson. I don't get any enjoyment. The only thing this book gave me was an absolute hatred for it, and I was just so angry by the end of it, because things do not get addressed at the end. The ending is so disappointing. I was like, literally, are you kidding me right now? It's just, please do not read this book. Please do not. I know, like, oh, the premise sounds really intriguing. The premise is so much better than what the book actually is that I genuinely do not think that it's worth reading. So that's how I started off 2025. Yeah, that's how I started off, and I gave it a 1 out of 5 stars, because like literally that was a 1 out of 5 star book. Then I was doing my reading romance books for a week video, and the first book that I read for that was The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. This is my second Ashley Poston. I read The 7-Year Slip last year, and it was one of my favorite books. I gave it a 5-star review. So I was pretty excited to get into her books, because I've been meaning to read more of them, and this one was pretty good. It follows Florence Day, who has the same name as me. They're just kind of weird. And she is a ghostwriter for a really popular romantic comedy writer, or just like a romance author. And she gets a new editor, because her old one had retired, and her new editor is this guy named Benji Andor. And they kind of immediately start to like have this kind of nice attraction with each other. They meet each other, and probably in the first 5 chapters they kiss. Literally after that, he dies. It's like in the premise, and she doesn't know until her dad also dies. So she goes back to her hometown, and her whole family is in their little town, and they own a funeral parlor. So they're getting ready for her dad's funeral, and Benji shows up as a ghost, because she can also see ghosts. So she's kind of reckoning with being a ghostwriter, because she's really stuck with the ending of the new book she's supposed to ghostwrite. She's also having this romance with Benji while also knowing that he's literally dead, and she is also grieving her father. So a lot of things are going on at once, but I think what Ashley Poston consistently has a really good formula with, or she knows how to juggle all these different topics, because they feel like they were all kind of given decent time and space to be explored in the book. I love her writing style. It feels more like a literary fiction almost than a complete romantic comedy. The romance was not my favorite part of this book. I will say that it was kind of cheesy at times, and their banter was just okay. I wasn't obsessed with it, which is why I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, but it was still a very solid book. And yeah, I think this would be a good read if that sounds interesting to you. So the next book that I read is my first 5-star of 2025, and I feel like this genuinely is already going to become one of the best books that I will read this year, because I have been meaning to read this for so long, and I got the physical of it because I was so invested. And usually when I buy a physical, that means I have like really high expectations for this book, and I did. I'm not gonna lie, I did. It's Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. I'm so excited to talk about this. So basically, I started this probably in December, and I was reading like a chapter every day because the chapters are actually pretty long in this book. I think it's a little over, okay, it's nearly, how long is this book? Nearly 500 pages. So I don't really know why this felt so long to me, but it felt long, but I was really excited to read it. I was okay with the pacing of this book. I have seen so many people talk about it online. I purchased this and it has been on my wish list for so long. It's been on my reading list for so long. Literally, I was excited to read this, and it literally blew my expectations literally out of the water. Oh my god, okay. I should probably explain what this book is about before I tell you how much I loved it. But this book is basically set, it's like a sci-fi fantasy book. I don't know if this is adult or young adult. For me, it feels a little bit more adult just with her writing style, which is kind of like detailed in the way that Olivia Blake's like writing style is, but it's not so rambly and, you know, confusing, because Olivia Blake likes to ramble. This kind of is similar to that in its denseness. I would also kind of compare it a little bit to R.F. Kuang's writing style, both in how descriptive they are. And I think how R.F. Kuang writes her characters and banter is kind of similar to this. So you kind of get a feel of her writing style, and I genuinely love her writing style so much. So this takes place in a sci-fi fantasy world where there are like 9 different planets, and the main character, Gideon the Ninth, is from the 9th planet, and she is like a necromancer. And the 9th planet's whole thing is that they deal with the dead a lot, and the current like ruler is this girl who's 17 years old named Harrow, and she can control like the bones of skeletons and use them as weapons. So basically there's this thing where all the different people, you know, like rulers and the necromancers and the cavaliers. So Gideon the Ninth is Harrow the Ninth's cavalier, like she protects her. So all of them from the different planets, all 9 of them, they go together for this one kind of competition to ascend their powers and like become a lictor. I think that's what it's called, where they basically are like a god almost. They have a lot more power and they're just all seeing, and they basically want to do that because it's really going to benefit their planet. And when they all converge at this one competition, sparks go flying. There are like a lot of battles. It's kind of a mystery, but I will say that the mystery is more slow in the beginning, and then at the end you're literally like, what is going on? This is crazy. But yeah, I don't want to say too much more because I read somewhere or someone reviewed it and said that you should go into this knowing as little as possible, and I went to this barely knowing anything, and I think it really worked for me. I just want to tell you a little bit, because if this doesn't sound interesting, then you probably don't want to read it. I recommend this book so much. It's not for everyone, is what I will say, because I think that the pacing of this book, if you're here solely for the mystery and you don't care about Gideon, you don't care about Harrow, then you probably won't like it as much, because the mystery is a mystery, and literally I couldn't figure it out, and you could tell that like everyone else in the competition also was like, literally, what are we doing here? It's that high of an intellectual level. I feel like Tamsin Muir is a true genius. Banter between the characters are so good. I really want to read Harrow the Ninth, but I'm just like psyching myself up for it because I know it's gonna be so good and it's gonna take so much out of my time, and I'm gonna become obsessed with it like I am with Gideon the Ninth. But yeah, I hope that was a coherent review. I don't know, all I can say is that it's really good, and it has such a crazy plot twist. Their twists are so unpredictable. The characters are so fantastic. I genuinely love Gideon so much, and I also love the rest of the characters from the other planets. I will say though that if you read this, I would recommend doing physical. Not, you don't have to buy it, like even from getting from the library, I recommend physical over ebook because there's so many characters and she kind of doesn't really care whether or not you know them, so she just puts all their names in, and half the time I was like, who is this? Because I would literally forget. But in the beginning of the book, there is like, I think it's kind of like a character guide, yeah, of each house, and then it tells you like who is part of it, their names, and their roles. So that was really helpful because I could easily flip back and forth to figure out who this person was. But yeah, this is a 5 out of 5 star book. It's so good. Tamsin Muir has quickly become one of my favorite authors, and this is literally her debut, which is unreal. So the next book that I read this for school, so I won't say too much about because I feel like I couldn't give an objective opinion that much because I analyzed it and like we did, I don't know, literary stuff with it. This is like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel. Even though we analyzed it and we read it to discuss, I hated this book and I give it a 1 out of 5 stars. That is my opinion. That's all I'm gonna say. Then I read Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong, or Wang. Wong. Or Wang, I don't know. But basically, this is a, I don't know if this is YA fantasy, I can't even lie. It has a more mature writing style, I will say, but I think the content is like between YA and adult fantasy. Not super adult, but I would say like even with content, it's kind of a step up from YA just because it's kind of more gory, I think, and the author doesn't stray away from like really getting into the gritty details of it. But this takes place in a very technologically advanced fantasy world, and we follow this one researcher, and she is a woman, and in the magical like mage system, the highest kind of court of them, they are all men, and historically they have never been any women to join that high magical court. It's kind of like the magic government in a sense, where like they use typewriters to practice their spells, and it's very technical, which is pretty interesting. But she is a super genius and she's just a really hard worker, and she ends up becoming the first woman high mage. So we kind of follow her story with that, with how she is kind of dealing with being a woman, and also just her intense wanting for knowledge and to pursue her magic. And then she also is like pretty discriminated against. There are some scenes of sexual assault. It's not super on the page, but it is there. But she is just not having a good time because people are so sexist and no one treats her like an equal. And in that kind of bullying that she endures, you know, they're supposed to be very mature, high scholarly mages, one of the guys, or like one of her coworkers, somehow gives her the janitor as a joke to be her assistant because she doesn't have assistants and she's just become the new high mage. So she takes him as her assistant, and her assistant and her collaborate on her research, which is very cutting edge. And while she's doing that, both he and her, mostly her, they discover the truth of their magic, because their whole thing is that like their magic is used to propel all the energy in their world, so they need to have a reservoir of this magic. And it kind of talks about like the price we pay for knowledge, glory, and also just talking about like feminism. And there is a little bit of a romance subplot, but it's very, very small. It's definitely not what is part of the entire plot. And I think even though I didn't explain it that well, to me it kind of feels like Arcane, where there's like two worlds, because there's like the what is that world called? I don't know. There's just like the world where all of the good people live in, like they live in a very nice state, and there's like the undercity. This is kind of like that, where like you need to see where your profits are coming from, because like the undercity is being exploited. And yeah, it's just the cost of power. And it was such a good discussion about so many different topics. I really liked the maturity to which this was written about, it felt very, very good. And I don't know, I read it pretty fast and I was just so here for the ride. I will say that there's not that much on the page action. It doesn't feel that much like your kind of typical YA fantasies where they go on like a big journey. No, most of this is like taking place in the lab and they're making discoveries, but I still found it very compelling and interesting. So I would definitely recommend Blood over Brighthaven. It is so good, so good. And I've heard a lot of other people saying that they really enjoyed it as well. So yes, I highly recommend. I gave it a 4 to 5 stars. So on to the last book that I read this month. I think this video will be pretty short. The last book that I read was an arc from NetGalley, so thank you for that arc. And this is Designed for Disaster by Leslie North. The full title is something like a Manhattan boss holes steamy romance. I don't even know, but considering the cover, and I read this from my reading romance books for a week video, this is very, very goofy. It is so immediately lusty and they have such a physical attraction to each other upon their first meeting that in my reading experience, it just got so old so very fast. It follows this barista named Natasha, and basically when she gives this guy his drink, I don't even know his name, let's just call him, because she calls him Coffeezilla, so let's call him Coffeezilla. What is his name? I feel like I should know this. Oh, his name is Trent, the most douchey name of all. Yes, his name is Trent. So basically she's working at this coffee shop and Trent comes in and he's on the phone and he's talking very, very importantly to somebody. So when she gives him his coffee, he sits down at a table, but he doesn't notice the fact that it says like out of service or something because the table's wobbly. So he puts his coffee down and she's trying to tell him and he's like, hey, don't talk to me on the phone. And then his coffee falls, the table is wobbly and it falls on him. And then she's laughing because she's like, oh my god, karma. And then he's like, you know what, I'm gonna fight you. So they have a fight in the coffee shop and then he leaves and oh no, he doesn't leave. And then her manager, this guy who basically lives by the motto, the customer is right, does not like her fighting with a customer and he fires her for fighting with him. And Trent is there all smug and it's like, I told you so. And then she loses her job and Trent goes on with his day as the CEO of a highly successful furniture company, which he is the CEO because he's a nepo and his grandparents and his parents ran it. So let's just not consider Trent to be that big of a genius. But basically then in Natasha's free time, she's kind of like a freelance architect. She sells a lot of her pieces on First Dibs and she has her clients there. And something happens, but they end up fake dating because Trent's grandmother is very sick and Trent wants to please his grandmother. So he knows that Natasha makes these really wonderful pieces of architecture and his grandmother has purchased from them before. So his grandmother likes Natasha. So in Trent's mind, he's thinking, oh, if I make Natasha date me and I have her fake date me in exchange for giving you a fantastic job as a designer at my company, my grandma will live for longer and she will actually rethink her decision about getting surgery, because her grandma didn't want to get heart surgery because she just didn't want to. That's like his grandma's decision. But then Trent is like, no, I actually think that you should get heart surgery and I'm gonna do everything in my power to make you get the heart surgery. So he thinks that if Natasha dates him, his grandmother's gonna be like, oh my god, I need to stay on this earth longer to witness this absolute diabolical couple. I think that's the logic. I don't agree with the logic because I think that is so oversimplified. But yeah, that's the basic plan. And literally in the first meeting after Trent gets her fired from her job, she's like walking away and he's looking at her butt and he's like, yeah, I'd like to see you walk away. So he's always looking at her butt, like always. She kind of is also the same. She's like, oh my god, his biceps look so good. But that's not the only reason that he likes her. For some reason, Trent is like obsessed with Natasha's butt. and it is so weird to read, and I hate Trent because also the third act conflict, which comes in and is very forced. He actually acts like a little baby and he throws the most enraging temper tantrum, but Natasha takes him at the end because she's like, oh, I love him. And yeah, I have probably a better explanation of this book in my reading romance books for a week, but I don't know. The more I think about it in hindsight, the more I hate Trent. And that's all I can say because he literally has no redeeming factor. Because not only, okay, this is a spoiler. Okay, number one, not only does he fire her from her original job as a barista, then he also fires her from her new job as a designer at his company that he gave her because she kept from him the fact that his mother contacted her. And then after like 3 weeks or something, a long time no contact, after he like yells at her and screams at her and then fires her, then after like, I don't know, maybe over a month of no contact, then he basically gives her a warehouse with all the special wood that she loves so much, and it's like, oh my god, like, this is for you, like, I'm so sorry. And then I don't know, something happens, but then he ends up like even proposing to her, and of course she says yes. At that point, the proposal I think is what did it for me, because I was like, no, like, this man has fired you twice and he literally has like anger issues and he's like 30 something years old. Like, man has not worked out his issues. He thought that one conversation with his parents saying that I'm done with you guys was therapy for all that he's been through. No, because you need therapy yourself first before you have a relationship. Yeah, I don't know why I suddenly feel like very strongly about it. When I first read it, I didn't, but the more that I've thought about it, the more my feelings are getting strong, because I was like, this book is weird. All things considered, I think there is a certain type of reader who kind of doesn't really mind more or less the physical attractions. For me, I don't really like that, but if you do, this book has that, so I think some people would enjoy it. And for that reason, because I know that this is very subjective opinion, because I just genuinely did not like the romance very much, but I know some people out there would, so I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. And those are all the 6 books that I read in the month of January.